because relationships are like a bridge, and all of them have different load capacity. And if the relationship has not been built into something that can hold a heavy load, and you're like, hey, I've got all this trauma from my past, it's like, here you go.
Right.
It creates two things. It fractures the relationship because it's not strong enough to carry that load. But then on your end, it creates in you a fear of pulling out, or a fear of being the one to end it, because now you feel like I'm going to make all of this worse.
Right.
And so it's kind of an unfair tactic, because you're kind of forcing the other person to stick around.
Welcome back to episode 4. Today in the studio, we are joined once again by Lisette and Cam, who have just the most awesome friendship group. And that's why they're on here talking about all things friendships, not with girls. That was the previous episode. But how do you be great friends with a guy? And we also have Cameron, because we thought that would be so awesome to try to not get confused between the Cameron and the Cam. So I'm going to do my best to keep those straight. So, Cameron, tell us a little bit about your role at Adventure and then your incredible family.
Yeah, well, I kind of have a hand in a little bit of everything.
That does not sound like working at Bayside.
I know. You've probably never heard that before on the pod. So one of the big areas that I lean into is groups. I teach on the weekend. And then really just assist Michael, who's our campus pastor, with anything and everything campus specific. So
I love it.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. It's fun.
And your amazing family?
My amazing family. So I married an Australian woman named Charmaine. She's the best. Objectively, my better 3/4. I don't even know if I'm 50% at this point. And then we have 2 beautiful kids, Carter, who's 4, and Zaya is 2. And you wouldn't know this, but Charmaine's Australian, but by blood, she's Chilean. And so our kids are very white, but they're technically half Chilean.
Nice.
So, well, fun fact.
Fun fact. Okay, so you came to Thrive College. You were part of our beta year class, but you worked with me in college ministry, which leads into talking a little bit more about Charmaine, because this was the most epic start to a relationship ever. So setting you guys up, literally, we were doing some type of like series on worship.
It was a worship series.
Okay, yeah. And I told you that I was going to interview Charmaine, who at this time was just this like, imagine. I'm not good with music. Give me a worship leader that everyone would know. Like the female equivalent of Brandon Lake. She was basically like that to all of us at Bayside.
Lauren Daigle?
Lauren Daigle. That's
Daigle.
perfect. Okay, she was like the Lauren Daigle of Bayside. Everyone was slightly intimidated to talk to her. I was like, she said yes. She's going to come to our college ministry. And so I'm going to interview her. Then I was like, that's a lot of girls on stage. And so like, I don't know, 30 minutes before the shore, our college ministry starts, I tell Cam, hey, you're going to interview her. And during their interview, like this vibe emerged.
Whoa.
Like the whole room, like at one point, Charmaine in her Australian accent said, my mom would love you. And the room goes, no way. I just start freaking out.
That was when we lost the room.
I lost the room. I literally can't even remember that we were talking about worship. Like, I was like, had to reach back into my memory.
It became the dating show really fast there.
I got off the stage and I had so many pictures of us texted to me from so many people going, I'm calling this right now.
Yes. Okay. So from that moment, a very public start to a initially friendship. Tell us about crossing from friendship into dating.
The hard part was she wasn't working at Bayside. She was still living in Nashville doing her music, and Bayside would just bring her out once a month, twice a month. And so we just started talking, and she would come out and we would just chat. She'd come, we'd worship for college or whatever, and then that progressed, and we started going for long walks and sharing worldviews and thoughts on God and life and family, and I think it progressed very naturally, and we're both I think fairly like old souls, deep people, and so it really just started with talking, but there did come a point where I was like, there was a breakdown in communication. it stopped flowing, and I was like, it's over. We're done. She's not interested anymore.
Real optimist.
And real optimist. Guys have a very fragile ego. And I just told myself, I was like, I'm not going to go out like this. I'm going to make her say it. We're not just going to fade to black.
Nice.
I'm going to make her say it. And so I had one more push, and I just laid it all out there. And that was when she was like, I feel the same. And
Feel the same about friendship or something more?
something more.
Okay.
No, I laid it out like,
Oh, you?
hey, I'm definitely
Okay.
interested in
All right.
this. And she felt the same. And the rest is history. We got married in Australia. You were there.
Yes, that's right.
And Shane was in my wedding. And yeah.
It is so epic. And if you see them today, they're just kind of, you can tell that friendship foundation was there because they're talking to each other. They're caring for each other. They're, one's got the kids while the other person, like just this past week, we had a live recording of Thrive Worship's new album. Charmaine was on for that. And you were backstage with the kids, and you're there for each other in the way that, friendship creates that bond between you. So
Yeah,
I love that. So fun. Thanks for sharing the story. It's always my favorite to rehear it. And how brave of you to just decide, I'm not going to let it fade to black. What a great phrase. Like, I'm going to actually pursue that clarity.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't want to wonder for
Yes.
It's the worst.
many years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would rather just, if you got to punch me in the face, just do it. And then we'll know.
so
Punch you in
good.
the face.
Love
At
it.
least you'll be prepared.
If you're dying to know Charmaine, she was actually on the podcast. So you can go back to season 1 and listen to her awesome episode. So with that, Lisette, what question do you want to kick us off with?
Yes, I think coming off of being friends with the guy first, say that person doesn't necessarily have feelings for him yet, but they just genuinely want to get to know the person as a person and be friends. Where's the line between being nice and friendly, but not being like flirtatious, or not the guy thinking that, oh, they're interested in me, so like, does she have a crush on me or whatever it is? Like, from the guy's perspective, what does that look like for a girl to reach out and be like, hey, do you want to hang out? Is that, give off vibes of like, she's into me or what?
Yeah, that's good.
I think it probably,
Go ahead.
I think it probably depends a lot on context and like relational equity. If it's a long-standing, I didn't trust. I worked with college students for so long. As a college student, I didn't trust anybody, and so I was very careful with my female relationships because it's also different. I think when you're, helping lead a ministry and you're on stage and I think things can very easily get misconstrued. So I was really careful about that. But so all of like my closest girlfriends were either fiancés or married to like my closest guy friends. Because I felt like at that point it was like, all right, they're safe. Like,
Yeah.
I know, like we're good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think, like the great thing about Thrive, the great thing about serving together, the great thing about church, I think, is you get to be around people just naturally. Mm-hmm. And so I think, building off a foundation of it being really organic, because I think for guys, we will immediately go there. If it's just like out of the blue, there's not been a lot of that foundation laid, and it's like, hey, you want to hang out? And we're like, yeah, I do actually. So I think the context definitely matters. I don't know if that's a very clear answer, but women are not very clear. So
That can be very true.
That's so good. What good advice would you give to a guy who finds himself in that seat that you were in with Charmaine of just being like, I don't know what the status is here. She could just think of me as a friend, or she could not. How would you encourage someone to actually have that conversation?
Two things. I think the first one would be not rushing it. I think in Christian culture too, like people get married really quick and really young and really.
Yeah.
I don't think you can ever have too much trust with somebody, but you can always have too little. And so I think when you don't let it kind of percolate and you don't let that foundation get laid, I think you can move too quick and you can spook people and you can not be ready. So I think not moving too quick. And then I think the second thing is it's something that Pastor Ray is so good at. And if you've been at Bayside for any amount of time, you've heard him say the same things 1,000,000 times. But there's some brilliance to being really clear and over communicating. And so I think just when you reach that point where you're like, okay, I think I'm ready to reveal where I'm at or be honest where I'm at, like being very direct, because I think when, hormones are going crazy and I think there's a lot of room for miscommunication, and I think just being really clear. And a lot of times we're afraid of being really clear because if it's a no, then it's pretty clear it was a no.
Right.
Whereas if you're kind of dancing around and you're not getting the right vibes, you're like, well, maybe there's still I think just being clear and just being really direct.
Yeah. To piggyback off of that, I even think of how it might be super clear to the two people, but a lot of times I think the social pressures, especially in the church, I think we all love relationship. We love to match people up, and that can sometimes construed like what the relationship actually is. And so one thing my friend actually told me was when you're having a friendship with a guy or even friendship with a girl, that's like, when you guys are just hanging out and together, what are you talking about? Is it something that if anyone else were to sit in that conversation, is that like healthy, or is that misleading or misguiding in any direction that would make people think like, oh, you guys need to talk about something because there's something happening, But I always thought of that was really good. It's like keeping it clear, meaning if there was a clear door, then it would be fine and nobody would be confused and lead it.
Right.
Yeah.
So like if someone wandered in and you're just having this emotional heart to heart, and they'd be like, I feel awkward entering this, as opposed to just if someone could walk up and you'd be like, yeah, join the conversation. That's a good place to be.
Yeah.
And I think
it's really good.
This is something that I think we talk about at one of the intensives, relationships or one of the other ones, but history sharing and not sharing stuff that's too heavy too quick. Because relationships are like a bridge, and all of them have different load capacity. And if the relationship has not been built into something that can hold a heavy load, and you're like, hey, I've got all this trauma from my past. It's like, here you go.
Right.
It creates two things. It fractures the relationship because it's not strong enough to carry that load. But then on your end, it creates in you a fear of pulling out or a fear of being the one to end it, because now you feel like I'm going to make all of this worse. And so it's kind of an unfair tactic because you're kind of forcing the other person to stick around.
Can I ask another question?
Of course.
That makes me think of, it's not a term that I would say is in the Bible, but I've heard a lot in the Christian community is soul ties. Like when it comes to talking about really deep spiritual stuff with another person, that can almost like bond the two together and be really difficult if that were to not end well or break up or separate from each other. How do you prevent that from happening, if that even is a thing? And like, what does that look like? What do you know about soul ties?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I'm writing my dissertation on soul ties. I don't know. I think that's where you have to be careful not to let your emotions get the better of you. Because I think everybody on a human level wants to be seen, and everybody on a human level has suffered. And so I think that's something that naturally I think builds credibility. Like if you and I sit down and we don't know each other and I'm like, hey, look what I've been through. That means something. And so I think we all want to be seen in that. We want to share that stuff. But again, like Charmaine and I spent many, many, many hours walking, and we also did that not in the public eye. We went to a park by her house, and we just do laps around the park, and nobody knew that we were hanging out. So trying to avoid that social pressure. But I think asking yourself, like, if this doesn't go beyond just friends, what am I going to want to walk away with this person knowing, because naturally if you go, well, I want to marry this person, then all bets are off, you're eventually sharing everything. But if it doesn't go that far, and we don't like to plan for that, we always are eternal optimists when it comes to relationships. But I think, if this doesn't go beyond just friends, it's not fair for me to place this burden on you. And I think, if you have good people in your corner and you can keep your emotions in check, I think you feel as the relationship progresses when it's appropriate to keep, getting close to developing that soul tie, I guess.
That's good.
I don't know.
Yeah, no. I've read no books on soul ties, so I'll take that. That's a good answer. I really love what you were saying earlier, though, about going back to kind of maybe the beginning of a relationship between a guy and girl, even a friendship, is that the adage is true that time really does tell all. Especially for guys, we love to just hop in and just get going, like run. We'll go 60 miles per hour in a relationship or a friendship. But for those who are out there who are wondering, man, maybe this could be a friendship and something more, really take time. Like just slow down, have those conversations, have those walks. Because in 3 months, like we were talking about on the last episode, guys' emotions, they don't really know all of them that well, right? And they change pretty often, especially being a younger guy. So just take your time. Like you'll figure it out. Give it a few months. Slow down. And I want to ask you a question, going back into the friendship realm of things with girls. What have been some of the best experiences or teaching moments between you and a girl that you've just been friends? Like, what have you learned? What have you gained from that? You can go to maybe you and Charmaine or another person.
I think that's a good question. I think ultimately, whether I think the same is true whether it's a girl that's a friend or if it's a girl that's becoming more than a friend. I think ultimately, like, you have to be a safe space. And I think, again, whether that's a girl that's a friend or a girl that's going to become more, I think for them to know that, like, I'm here and I'm not going to step over any of your boundaries, and I'm a safe place for you to come to without fear of this getting weird or progressing into a weird.
Yeah, that's good.
That's what I tell a lot of younger people who are looking to get into relationships, especially guys, mostly guys, is she needs to know that you don't need anything from her. Because I also think that's one of the reasons as guys we sometimes jump in too quick is because we need something from the other person. And I think the healthiest way to build a relationship is if you're both contributing, because if you jump into it and you just need her to affirm you or to validate you, it's going to get unhealthy really quick. And as guys, it's really easy to practice that with female friends, because there's naturally that boundary there that this can't go beyond, such and such. But I feel like that's probably the most important thing, because it doesn't change when you get married. Your wife, I think one of the things that, you have a lot of misconceptions about marriage before you get married. And it's like the weirdest thing, but you get married and that does not automatically mean that you fully trust your spouse forever, no questions asked. You have to keep building that trust and maintaining that trust and that equity. And, it's not just like I have a ring on my finger and now all of that is, the friendship has to remain, a core piece of who you are. And so that continues well beyond marriage.
Yeah.
Very good.
I just want to put an exclamation point on what you said about one of the greatest skills you can learn in being friends with a girl. One of the greatest gifts you can give to women being friends with a girl is to be a safe place. I cannot tell you how many women I talk to in this life season of just being like, man, I just want someone watching out for me. I just want someone that I know that I can trust and rely on. And I've been in a weird situation a lot of times in Thrive College where I just know both sides. I know the guy's side, I know the girl's side. And I know maybe that DTR happened and they sat down and a guy was like, hey, I need you to tell me whether you're interested or not. And the girl is like, I'm going to choose clarity, so I'm not. But she can come into my office and she's going to be like, I don't know. I'm still figuring it out. Right. And so I'm never going to be the go-between. I'm never going to tell the guy. But what I want to do is go tell the guy, okay, now is your moment. Now is your moment where you're going to prove to her if you're truly safe. If you are in it for the friendship to get something more, or if you are in it to be a good friend. And sometimes being a good friend means not being the person she calls at 3 a.m. to tell sob stories to.
Yeah.
But maybe it says smile at her, say hello to her, even if it's a little awkward for a bit, just still act like a good, normal human being instead of icing her out because she didn't take the relationship further. And what I know is if he would show that type of faithfulness, there's like such a high probability, not always, I don't want you to hear the wrong thing. Like, let's not go How I Met Your Mother situation. Like sometimes a no is a no, but sometimes that consistency, that reliability creates the safety space for a girl to actually feel out how she's feeling and for feelings to grow. And so whether or not you get what you want out of the relationship in terms of something more, I think learning that skill of being a safe place, so huge.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. Well, and to continue to, because in marriage, you don't always get what you want.
That's right.
But you still have to be a safe place. You still have to be supportive. You still have to be, there's always a give and take, and you're always working with the other person. And so if consistently all of your relationships are like, I want what I want when I want it, and if I don't get that, I'm out.
Yeah.
That's not safe for anybody. But again, it doesn't just stop once you get married.
So I know you had great friends growing up, Cameron. You had just a crew of guys that you were always hanging out with. And I also know that there were moments where that friendship absolutely blew up.
Yeah.
And you had the same thing in college. I don't know about the blow up part of it, but you had great guy friends. And then Cam, we had you and all the guys from the Matrix friend group over for tacos one night. You guys were just, it was like Shane and I were not even in the room.
I'm sorry.
No. In the best way possible. It was our house. I thought you came over to hang out with us, but it's fine. No, but you guys were just reminiscing, telling stories about you guys' hangs, and just, you were killing each other. Like you were laughing so hard, just remembering.
I thought you were laughing with us, but maybe not.
I was laughing with you.
They were laughing at us, yeah.
Definitely, you guys were like completing each other's sentences in a way I didn't fully catch the story. What I'm trying to say here is you guys both know what it's like to have great guy friendships. And I know at least for you, Cam, you know what it's also like to be betrayed in those friendships and have to work through that. So give us some tips for how guys can best be friends with other guys.
That's really good. On the last episode, Rachel Annis said about competitiveness that when girls don't know each other really well, they're more competitive. And then as they get closer and talk and really understand each other, they get less competitive. With my experience, at least, it's been the exact opposite. When I'm first meeting a guy, I just want to be his friend. I want to be kind, that kind of stuff. No competitiveness. Right? I'll let him beat me in a game of ping pong, basketball, whatever it is.
I like that you would let him.
I would let him, right? Because he couldn't, anyways, doesn't matter.
Never.
And then as we get closer, and I'm sure this is true for anybody who is close to me, that we get incredibly competitive. And I think it's good to understand that is not a bad thing, but it needs to be managed, because I've seen it in my own life and in other people's lives destroy relationships. The comparison just goes crazy. That guy got a girlfriend, that guy is doing this sport, that guy is doing this is whatever it is. And it can be like, well, no, this is my friend. Where did this come from? I wasn't like this before. But as you just get closer and closer and learn to understand each other, you can kind of see the flaws of that person more so, and you start judging them for those flaws and be like, well, they're doing this, but these people don't know that about him, right?
Right.
He doesn't deserve this, so on and so forth. So I think it's important to just realize that for most guys, I think that's going to happen, and just be ready for it. Have open, honest conversations. It is not less manly. It is not shameful to talk about your feelings and how you're, in a relationship with a guy, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Just be open, be honest, and a little bit of competitiveness isn't a bad thing.
Love it.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I've ever felt competitive in life with my closest friends. Outside of maybe in one incident in high school. Dating the same girl will do that.
Wow. At the same time, or like
maybe.
Oh wow.
Still friends to this day. Still friends to this day.
We believe in God of second chances. He redeems.
He
redeems.
I think Yeah, competitiveness is really big, and people I think will tell you in leadership and in life with friends, right? Don't be the smartest person in the room. So with friendship, what does that mean? Is like don't be the most talented, the hardest working. That you should have friends that are more than that. But I think there's a big difference between making people feel inferior and making people want to be better. And I think with my closest group of friends who I've been friends with for anywhere from 10 to 20, 25 years now, I've never felt inferior with them. They have made me want to be better, but I've never felt like it's a competition from them. And so I don't think I've ever given that back. And I think sometimes you get around people and they kind of start posturing. And, Charmaine and I, even as a couple, the people that we enjoy spending time with the most are people where there's not a lot of, it's just this is who we are, the good and the bad. And there's a comfort in that. And so I think I gravitate to people like that. And then I try to be a person like that because, again, it goes back to, being a safe place, and people are safe when you know who they are and they're not afraid to, So I think, probably more has to do with the people around me than anything that I've done or been. But I think, they all make me want to be a better person, but they've never made me feel like less of a man or less of a leader.
Yeah. How did you deal with that friendship that you just utter betrayal? Probably on both sides, it felt that way. How is it that you are still friends?
To be honest, we talk about it. I have no idea. So the story goes, as high school, one of my best friends, I start dating a girl. I move away. He starts dating her. I move back.
Dun, dun, dun.
That's already betrayal. You don't do that.
We start
You don't
dating
do that.
again.
Yeah.
And then somewhere along the lines, we find out that there was probably overlap and we were probably dating at the same time. We didn't know. And I was this whole thing.
And the girl was someone that I mentored. It was
So
really,
it's Dina's
really
fault.
exciting.
Dina.
It's my fault. Yeah.
You should have known this, Dina.
She's like, wait, I thought
feel
his name was
bad for
Cameron.
Oh, so
What are you
awkward.
talking about again?
Dina
Yeah.
was fomenting
It was me.
insurrection behind the scenes.
You can tell what a great discipler I am, like how I move people towards good life choices.
Not only that, but Shane taught me how to play poker.
Oh, yeah.
And took my money.
Yeah,
So really, you guys have had a net negative impact on my life.
I also
Killia
brought
makes
you to
us stronger,
Bayside.
man.
Or that was Shane. Yeah,
was
what have
also
I done in
Shane.
your life?
Yeah.
I
So
need to make amends.
He's like a net
I
neutral
put
now.
you on the panel with Charmaine.
That's
That
true.
was redemption.
All right.
We're good.
We're good. Yeah, to be honest, I have no idea. I wish I could give you some David and Jonathan answer.
Oh my goodness.
But I think I just had a conversation with a woman about leaving the church and just some frustrations and feelings that she had. We got to the end of the conversation. She's like, "So what do you think?" And I'm like, "Well, I think this is probably a pretty bad reason to leave the church." And I think the same is true in friendships. And there are good reasons, I think, to end a friendship, and there are not so good reasons to end a friendship. And so I think on some level we both realized that we both were probably not great friends. And we both realized that we wanted that friendship more than the relationship.
Yeah.
And we're friends 25 plus years now. So
Love that.
somehow we made it.
You made it.
Still laugh about it.
Man. The thought of that ever happening to girls without like hours of conversation of just working through that trauma. I do actually appreciate that dynamic in guys' friendship is sometimes you have this soul understanding, like we're moving forward, like we're moving past this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
each person's going to do the work necessary to move past it.
Yeah.
I like that. Very cool. Cam, did you think of your question?
I have a question. If you
Not really. Yeah, go ahead.
It's gone. It's gone forever.
It's so gone.
We
Hey,
moved.
maybe it came over here. In the holster.
What if he says, that's it? That's
Okay,
it.
might be. Let's see. So, if you have a friendship with a guy, and you guys are really close, how can the girl best encourage and at the same time challenge that person in their faith, or just in life in general? Is that like something that the girl can do? Is that a place that she can hold, or like how do you go about that, best encouraging and supporting him?
Yeah. So I think all guys have a deep need and drive to be valued and to be, that's a huge human thing. But we also know that like fatherlessness is rampant right now. Broken homes rampant right now. That's a big part of my story. And so there's a lot of guys with daddy issues, and that creates a lot of really insecure men. And so I think men always need to be grounded in, again, like a safe relationship, but always need to be grounded in people in their lives, whether it be male or female, going, hey, I see you, and you're somebody worth being seen, and, respect you. And I think, encouragement costs us very little, but it goes a really long way. And I think there's a lot of guys, broken home or not, present father or not, a lot of guys who are starving for encouragement. And I think it drives them to do a lot of not great things to fill that void. So I would be careful not being too effusive in your praise, or else be like, wow, Lisette's really digging me. And that's where I think specifics help more than generalities. Like, instead of going, man, you are so amazing, and I just love who you are and how you, like, good Lord, like, I can't do anything wrong, and being like, hey, how you handled that, I think was really admirable, and you showed a lot of character, and a lot, like, being very specific, I think is very reassuring and encouraging, and I think reduces the chances of me going, she's really into me.
Going back to an earlier question, like, how do we tell whether someone is interested or not? Some of the best advice I've ever had is, like, especially guys' radars are always up for when a girl is treating them differently. Like, that is just what their radar is looking for. And so if you're going to do that encouragement, but you want to not send the wrong message, I think just make sure he's not the only person, but that, so within the Matrix, if you're going to be encouraging
Matrix
to
is
Cam,
our fan group, by the way.
Yes,
I don't
that's
know if we
right.
mentioned
Sorry,
that.
in this episode, right. Matrix is the awesome friendship group that Cam and Lisette are part of. And so you would say something encouraging to Cam, and not being weird, but like maybe in a few days you would single out something about Lance or Matt, and so that Cam's not like, oh, I thought, she only encouraged me. And that
How
radar
dare
doesn't,
she?
how
She betrayed
dare
me.
she? Yeah. Exactly. I think guys' radar is specifically up for that. And weirdly enough, girls' radar is not up for that, but it should be. Like, this is something that girls can learn. So if you're like, he opened the door for me. Yeah, he did. Did he open the door for like 7 other people after you? Because that matters. Because typically,
but I walked in first.
Yeah, but it was me. It was me. He
me.
just felt obligated for like, that's the stuff. That's the nonsense girls do.
Yep.
But I think guys are very good for the most part about being intentional when they are interested in women, about doing things differently for her. That's just something that they will do. So girls could stand to have their radar up a little bit more, and girls be conscious that guys' radar is up. So if you're constantly treating him in a different way than you are the other guys in the room, that's probably going to communicate a message you may or may not. But that leads me to a great question, because I obviously at the end of maybe Thrive College or a few years from now want both Cam and Lisette to be married to awesome people, or at least in a serious relationship. Do you want to ask Cam Rin? It's not Cam. Yeah, see, I was doing so well. Cam Rin, how to win a guy over?
Yes. How do I get game, bro? That's what I want to know. How do I win over the guy?
Goodness.
Goodness.
Over the awkward saying that.
Do guys like romance?
I think so. Yeah. Well, I mean,
Really?
they should probably. My father-in-law would have a very different answer, but we're working through it. Well, I was just gonna say maybe this pertains to this, is that I think one thing that sticks out to people on this side of a relationship or this side of a marriage is, how people act when they're single is a really good indicator of how they're going to act once they're in a relationship, right? So as a girl, if you're looking at guys to potentially, take that next step with, guys who are serially talking to a lot of girls or serially, in that space might be a little bit of a turnoff, because I think it creates a question in your mind. Once we get into a relationship, is that going to stop? And like I said earlier with marriage, there's a lot of things that carry into your marriage that don't just magically go away, right? Which is why, you probably are looking for somebody who, and this is something that I tried to do when I was doing college ministry before I met Charmaine, is I'm single, but I'm going to do my best to act like I'm in a relationship. Because then once I am in a relationship, nothing drastically has to change. I don't have all these female friends that I have to cut out of my life because it's now weird because I've got this other, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You want somebody who has built that foundation in their life. And then I think, here's a non-sexy answer. How old are you, Lisette?
21.
21. So the non-sexy answer is, I think, what's really attractive to men who are interested in somebody for the long haul and not just looking for a girlfriend is somebody who's doing their thing. And I don't think there's a shortcut to quality relationships. I don't think there's anything that you can I'm going to start doing this, and then I'm going to start attracting this next level of.
Last episode, we asked the question,
Yeah.
to Rachel about how to get a girl, and she said, "Oh, girls love when guys laugh." And so Cameron, I mixed
Are
that
funny,
up.
yeah.
Are funny, and then Cameron's like, "I gotta be funny. I just gotta get
That's
the
a
girl to laugh."
shortcut.
That's a shortcut, but it's also a good tip.
Well, it's
Sorry.
not that easy being funny, but go ahead.
It's going to take some work, okay? Don't expect it to
Yeah,
happen
yeah.
overnight.
So one thing you said one of your favorite things about you, or one thing that you're proudest of, was your empathy. So one thing Caleb Kaltenbach, who's a friend of Bayside's, told me one time is there's no such thing as quick empathy. There's no way for you to arrive in an empathetic worldview or relationship if you have not spent time in that relationship or with those people, right? Empathy takes time to develop. You don't just show up and you're like, man, I feel for you.
Start weeping. Yeah.
Right. And I think the same is true with relationships. There's no shortcut. And, I think for you at 21 to be looking at man, this is something that I really want. I think personally, when you let that steer the ship, it leads you probably down roads you don't want to go. Because when you start feeling like I have to start doing something, you start pushing. From my own life experience with God, outside of, my faith, anytime I have pushed when I shouldn't be pushing, it's not ended well. And at least with my story with Charmaine, it happened because I wasn't in a season where I was pushing for it. So I think, doing you is option A1, as non-sexy as that
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. That's good.
Good. Very good.
Is that our last? Can I ask?
Yeah, you
Are
go
we
for
cutting
it.
it off?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then do you have another one, or
Cameron's
does
question is
Lisette
in
have?
the void.
Yeah, it's so
It's so-
outer space. at
You
the
can have a
moment.
different question.
That's got to be that question.
I was trying to.
I'm flummoxed.
I've got 7 others, but that one, I just.
That one.
No, let's go ahead.
Okay, Lisette, you got it.
I'm just curious, because I feel like I, in my head, kind of know the answer, and it can be an obvious thing, but do you feel like men are the one who should continue in pursuing that friendship into a further relationship, or is it almost, I don't know if it's unattractive for guys if women were to pursue or be upfront and just be like, hey, this is how I feel, or whatever.
I think
Just
there's 2 sides of this coin, and this is something we talk about at the relationships retreat or intensive. On one side, guys are really dumb, and the radar that
dumb.
Dina talked about is not very fine-tuned, and so we need help. We need a lot of help, which is why going into my relationship with Charmaine is I'm just gonna make her say it, because I'm not smart enough to piece together all of these signs, and so I think they need help. So I do think it's a good idea for a girl to give a really clear green light. I would also say that it's been my experience, at least in our marriage, Charmaine is so much more intentional about the deeper parts of our relationship. I tend to settle into a business partnership, we're doing life, we're raising kids, we're paying bills. That's kind of where I settle into. And she's like, well, yeah, but let's get our hearts together and let's make sure that soul tie is strong and healthy. And so I do think it's important. Not and you know, I don't think just to go like, yeah, old fashioned, like, you know, the guy should be the one to pursue. I think it gets lost in like, oh, that's a really traditional like gender roles. Some of that stuff is in place for good reason. And I think by and large, not always, but in general, the guy needs to learn how to pursue a woman. Like what we were talking about earlier, needs to learn how to pursue a woman when they're not feeling it, when they're not maybe getting everything that they want. Like a guy, I think, really has to learn how to do that because they're going to be doing that for the rest of their lives, right? He doesn't stop pursuing you the day that you guys say your vows, the day that you get married. It's the rest of your life. And guys historically are not great at doing that. So I do think it's important for you as a woman to know that you've got a guy who's going to keep fighting for your marriage when it's on the rocks, or when you guys are struggling, or who's fighting for your marriage when you guys aren't sleeping because you got young kids in the house. And you know what I mean? Like, you want to know that you know that you know that at the end of the day, you've got somebody who's willing to fight for you regardless of how they feel. Or that's why I think it's important.
That's so good. I think about the book of Ruth in regards to this question, and, you know, did Ruth pursue Boaz? And if you're just like, what is the story of Ruth? Go read it in the Bible. It's a great, great love story. So Ruth ultimately, on the advice of her mother-in-law, she goes and she like lays down at Boaz's feet, which is like a very interesting scene. You're like,
that's a green light.
Yes,
a green light.
Yes, that's the clear green light. I mean, she was so putting herself out there. And I think about that story, and it was like, hey, did she pursue Boaz? I think she was clear. She gave the clear green light, but what the story doesn't say is that she went every night and laid at his feet until finally he was like, okay, all right, I guess so. So I think women can stand to be a little less hesitant to give the clear green light, especially in Christian culture, which absolutely punishes guys for asking girls out. It's so weird. It's like we're upset that they don't, and we're upset that they do, and it just puts them in a really rough spot. And so in this weird Christian culture that we have, it's okay to be very clear in saying, hey, I am interested in you. Do with that what you wish. And my sister Jen, she follows all these Instagrams about relationships, and she's like, you know, it's always actually been the case that women had a pretty active role in pursuing a relationship. Like, you think about the old scene of a guy being like, hello, did you drop this handkerchief? And then the woman's like, why, yes, I did. You know, it's like the guy's just going about like doing life.
We just need to bring back handkerchiefs is what we need.
That is the clear green light.
Yes.
I dropped my handkerchief.
I like
Nowadays, it's like the phone.
hug and rub noses.
Drop your phone.
That's a pretty clear green light.
We didn't talk about this on
Okay,
the
wait,
camera.
that was earlier. People are like so confused. Okay, pre-podcast, we always play a warm-up game where we answer questions, and we learned something weird about the way Lisette handles
It's a
conflict.
discipline
Yeah.
to get us to be able to have conversation and a hug and rub noses to get along. But
Yeah, which we don't officially recommend on the podcast, but if you want to know more, you got to come hang out with Lisette and meet her and hear that story.
If though you're in a relationship and you want to be out of the relationship, it might be a good tactic to employ.
Yeah, there you go.
Perfect. So landing the podcast here, girls, don't be afraid to give that clear green light, but respect it if he does nothing with it, because that means he's not pursuing it. So if it's a green light and he's not going through that green light, then that's a red light for you, and you can change course. Final words, Cameron?
Well, I think with that, you would much rather have a guy who you have to give a really clear green light for him, you know, to go through that intersection than a guy who keeps going through a red light.
Wow, that's good.
So give the green light when you're ready, but that's the guy that you'd rather be with.
The really dense guys is who you want to go for.
Yeah. That you have to communicate.
Oblivious even.
So love it.
Lay at their
Do you want
feet.
that to be your last word, Cam?
Absolutely.
The guys are dense. That's who you want. Perfect. All right. Well, next episode, we're going to be talking about something that absolutely trips up most relationships, and that is the whole topic of boundaries. And so here's the deal. We get the relationship of our dreams, and then we end up making some really stupid mistakes. And they're stupid because we took something we valued, and instead of safeguarding it, we just did something that we did not want to do. So if you have ever wrestled with feeling like, man, this relationship is going places I don't want it to go, make sure to listen to the next episode. Myself and my husband, Shane, will be on, and we have just a great conversation about that. But thank you, Cameron. Legends. Cameron, thank you for being here today. And Lisette and Cam, keep being awesome friends with your group. And thanks for sharing all your wisdom and your fun with us.